Solar is this great source of renewable energy, and it is green, and it is something that is part of the solution. And with that, like any other forms of energy or any other type of assets, you have waste. Mm-hmm. Now, what an amazing story, what an amazing industry to be in, to figure out how to bring that full circle. And how do you now take something that is so readily used now and is expanding at a rate to 500 million panels installed in the US alone? And at some point, there needs to be a retirement plan for them. And how amazing is it to be part of that, either on the reuse side or to break them down into raw commodities and get them back into supply chain.
Adam Saghei is the CEO and founder of We Recycle Solar. It's North America's only utility-scale solar recycler and single-source lifecycle management provider. See, we've talked about it on the show, but there are thousands. I'm going to say probably millions of solar panels right now that are going into landfills. And it is a potential black eye on our industry. It is a problem that we've all known about for decades. And yet, like the yogurt containers coming out of your kitchen, we still can't figure out how do we capture the elements of this product that supposedly is creating sustainable, clean electricity. Our hearts are in the right place. We all know that we want to see this have a circularity element to it. Well, Adam and his team are some of the folks that are working on the mighty hard problem of recycling solar panels. So the question is, with 500 million plus solar panels anticipated to be installed in the market in the US alone, well over a billion, probably a billion in China alone, how do we integrate the reality that these products reach an end of their useful life, sometimes sooner than anticipated? With that in mind, introduce us to We Recycle Solar. I think most folks will recognize in the name what it is that you do, but why is your business going to solve the problem that we've just enunciated?
I think that we are looking to have solar keep its promise of a clean energy. And one of the inspiring things for us is we watched during COVID as supply chain was fragmented, and we saw a push within government, within the private sector, to try to re-inject the U.S. supply chain with raw commodities, materials, resources, and to be part of that, to be the fuel that is doing so. It's huge. So one of the misconceptions, and even though the name is We Recycle Solar, it's, yes, we do the obvious, but there's two other pillars to it. It's reuse, which is the best form of recycling, and getting it to underserved markets and empowering a generation of folks that just didn't have access. And the other being decommissioning, being able to now go out there and provide asset owners a service and look to also, right at the farm, reduce the breakage rate by up to 30%, which that is the goal. How do you keep building value at each turn, and how do you reduce the need to recycle? Because it starts with conservation, right?
Yeah. They'll reduce, reuse, recycle. You didn't mention refurbishing. I guess that is reuse. Is that right?
Yeah. I mean, that's part of the process to get to reuse.
Yeah. Sure. I want to dig into each one of these as we get further along, because there's a lot to unpack in terms of how this business has evolved. But the reality is that it's languished, and not just recycling solar panels, which I would say is decades behind other recycling, with good reason. But recycling in general, I mean, there's lots of data around whether or not what we believe to be recyclable is in fact recyclable. But let's just focus on the waste stream for our industry for now. Feel free to talk about any other sort of data that helps support the argument. But as you look around the solar industry specifically, what solutions exist today for developers or manufacturers where breakage or end of life is concerned for this product?
I mean, really the low-hanging fruit or the easiest option for any of these folks is landfill. And you're seeing about 90% of the current panels in the market, end of life, going to landfill. Recycling is a bit more expensive. There is a cost to it. It's not free. And that in itself is where we are today. That doesn't mean that, as new technology emerges and new players get into the space, that we can't lower that cost to be competitive with the landfill. But I foresee other incentives to all the asset owners to do so. But that's something to be seen here coming up in the future.
So obviously, there are solutions out there that are being proffered as alternatives to landfill. I guess at a macro level, Adam, when you started thinking about seeing the opportunity, clearly there was something happening for the 10%. So for those who are maybe unfamiliar, could you set the table for us in terms of the competitive landscape? And I'm not asking to name companies. I'm talking about what actually can get done beyond dropping it in the landfill right now.
So obviously, you mentioned, which is a great question. You mentioned, resale, which is always a plus. Anywhere at any turn, if you can utilize reverse logistics and returns management to then resell assets back into the market, that is a win-win for everyone. Aside from that landfill option, the recycling one, which is what we are very much focused on, looks to do one of a few things. How do you break down something that is durable, that wasn't meant to be broken down, and to take apart that pancake, layers that consist of copper, aluminum, glass, silicon, all of these resources that at some point, I'm going to go on a little tangent here. I'm going to go left field here.
Fine.
I was having a conversation with someone and they said to me, "What's the impact? And what's your why?" And I was like, my why is the level that we are contributing to this community is yet to be seen. We will talk about this, 5 years, 10 years later, when we look at solar is just not about energy. It's about access. It's about allowing a lot of the supply chain issues to be solved right here in the U.S., which, again, I'm very proud of. And the other part of it is, might be a little more controversial, not to get involved in politics, but you look at all the geopolitical issues that are happening around the world, right? And at some point in time, if we study those conflicts, a lot of it is over resources. They may not come out and say it in the very beginning initially, but what if we were in an industry that checked off all those boxes? How crazy would that be? Like the impact, right, that solar would have. And I think that's very much attainable within our lifetime. We're going to see this ripple effect that will really solve a lot of these problems.
You saw an opportunity to start a business that, by and large, is trying to innovate around and create new processes and technology for the recycling of this product that wasn't meant to be broken down. So if you think back over the last 10, 15, 20 years, what needed to be true for this business to work today? It
needed volume. It needed an immense amount of opportunity. And, when we talked about that 500 million panels that are installed in the U.S. market today, from, I want to say 2016 to 2030, they're seeing an uptick of 21 to 22% increase in volume of solar installation. So
per year.
per year.
Yeah.
And that's exponential growth. And so you need to have a problem to solve if you're going to try to solve one. And looking at that and unpacking that, there's a huge opportunity as solar is growing and for us to grow alongside that industry.
Mm-hmm. Is there anything technologically that needed to be invented or evolved that just wasn't possible 3, 5, 10 years ago?
When we, starting out in 2019, there wasn't an off-the-shelf machine. There was nothing. We had to use and cobble together pieces of equipment from other industries. We had to take technology from different sectors and bring it in and Frankenstein it together. Now there are options. We have a lot of folks that are innovating on that end. And sure. I believe within the next 3 to 5 years, you are going to see some players solve the other problem, which is throughput. How do we do this to scale? Mm-hmm. As that's the next big hurdle. You can do it right now, but how do you do it to scale that you can then become competitive at a landfill price point?
Competitive at a landfill price point. Can you put it into perspective? Because you mentioned earlier that it is much more expensive to recycle. What does that cost differential look like, and who bears that cost?
So currently right now, it is the asset owner. And to look at a comparison, you're somewhere between $2 to $5 at a landfill to dispose of a panel. And you could be upwards to 15 all the way to, $24, $25 to dispose of a solar panel through proper recycling. But I think there's ways, and I'm going to go back to that segment or that, to unpack that reverse logistics, returns management conversation.
Please do.
There are ways within the reverse logistics industry to offset some of these costs. And although there is no national or federal take back program, there is a way that we can internally offset some of these costs. And now I want to bring back reuse into that conversation. So we do it by taking just that, being able to take some of those assets and refurbishing and remarketing them. Mm-hmm. And we'll take it a step further. How does the material get handled from inception? And that is that on-site support to be able to properly manage and handle and package that to the plant. And we found through our metrics, you're looking at about a reduction about up to 30%, which is huge. That's not a cost that's being then given to the customer in recycling. You're able to salvage some of those assets.
I don't think I understand. Handling from inception from plant to field can reduce what up to 30%? Waste?
The breakage, yeah. So that breakage to make it, basically to transfer that to to the stack or pile or bin that would be then recycled.
So
it's a preventative measure.
Pause there for a second, because I think it's important. Actually, this is a key point, because when folks think about recycling, they think often about end of life. But what we know to be true is that most products are getting sent to the landfill that broke on the way to the project, broke on the project, broke somewhere along the way, and project's over, and they got to clear the site. And they're trying to get rid of everything and move on to the next project. It's not right. Right now, we aren't seeing a massive outflux of panels in Europe we are because of repowering, but we aren't seeing a huge issue of panels coming off of projects that have been in their asset performance lifetime. We're seeing product that just never even got into the game because it broke on the way there, right? That's breakage. And you're saying that there are ways, presumably you guys are working with manufacturers to reduce that breakage, which is the whole idea of recycling: reduce, reuse, recycle.
In this part of the conversation, I would say in this context, it would be from the farm to the plant to be recycled. Often, some of the asset owners are using temp labor. In some instances, they're truly not qualified in identifying which panels could potentially be remarketed, right. And that is a huge plus. So whether they get trained on that or we send specialized crews to do that, we've seen in certain instances that 30% of those panels can now be placed back into the market for resale.
So stuff's getting thrown away that could have been repurposed, that could have been sold into the developing countries for nothing. Give it to our buddy down in Florida, Sun Electronics. Let him sell it to Gabon.
Yeah. And there's and to your point, yes, there's a lot of players within the space that are doing a great job doing that.
Okay, that's actually a really interesting wrinkle I hadn't thought about, is not even working with the manufacturers as our friends at PV Pallet are doing to reduce the waste in the waste stream from factory to field, but from field to recycling center or from field to disposal facility, let's call it that. There is a selection bias that is based on people not knowing what they're doing. Okay.
Yes.
How interesting.
There's training. There's lack of training.
Yeah. So you started the business in 2019. What sort of startup cost is involved in this kind of a facility? I think I would presume that one of the reasons that we don't see more recycling beyond the reality that volume matters in recycling is that there's a high threshold to enter into the market. How did you go about funding this venture?
Bootstrapped it. I mean, as they said, it's internal capital, friends and family. It is. We exited out of a previous business that we were able to segue into this one, and so we were lucky enough to have that opportunity. But to your point, yes, it's very capital intensive. It is extremely R&D intensive, and now we're starting to see a different landscape. We're starting to see that the cost of entry is a little bit lower, but it comes with limitations.
So, friends and family, have you done any sort of institutional investment rounds yet?
We have not. So we wanted to. One of the mantras that I have is don't borrow until you absolutely need it. Right?
Yeah.
One of the I have some friends and colleagues that are in that Silicon Valley VC and in that world, and they love raising money for the sake of raising money. And I'm like, I've always run frugal. I've been one of those guys that just kind of rub my pennies together.
It's interesting, Adam, right? Like, and part of that is cultural as well, right? While we come from distinctly unique and different backgrounds, you and I come from Southeast rural farm family where we pull ourselves up by the bootstraps. We do everything ourselves. My dad's a carpenter. Like he's a classic case of like, I can do it better than anybody else. I just do it myself. And ingrained in me is this idea that I don't like being in debt to others. And I don't want to, I don't want that boss. Yet, my friend Jeff Greenfield, when I interviewed him, said that if he could do it all over again, the thing he would have done differently is raise money sooner, because he would have had less sleepless nights. He would have had, it's different sleepless nights, but he would have at least been able to afford Christmas gifts for his kids, for more than 50% of the years that they were running this 20-year business before he had a chance to sell it. There's always two sides to the coin. I guess some of your peers might say, good on you for bootstrapping it, but would having that kind of capital help you move faster, or are there structural limitations that capital can't fix?
So you just beautifully segued into that. Sometimes having capital does not get you to the race. Allows you to finish that race faster. As we are in yes, from an R&D technology standpoint, we are in a race. I believe that there is a time to raise, and that may be happening here shortly as we've proven a concept and now we're trying to scale. But we did this very slow and steady for the reason that we also needed the market to mature a certain way. And now we're having those conversations. I think that full stop, if we would have taken that money early on, we probably wouldn't have put it to good use. I think that the way that we did things,
that's honest.
Kind of, I'm just full stop, right? I think now we have a much clearer direction. Because in the beginning, a lot of times, especially with the new industry, it hasn't been done before. People are still trying to figure it out on so many different levels, and And at that particular time, we needed to get the kinks out before approaching someone and saying, hey, we want to take your money. Well, you better have a lot of things figured out if you're going to do that.
I alluded to us having different cultural backgrounds for those who aren't watching on YouTube. You're just listening to our sultry voices. They might think, who knows what about our culture. But I'd love to know where you grew up and kind of tell me a bit about your family and what informs a little bit of who, sort of the actual sort of entrepreneurial DNA of Adam Saghei.
Yeah. So it's interesting. That foundation, that fabric, if you will, very much I compare it to Persian rug, the warp and the weft, right? Going through. My background is, I'm Persian, and I was born in Iran, and came here when I was 7 years old, and it was, a tight-knit family that, was figuring out the law of the land, and didn't have much money. As I often joke that my parents practiced the block method. So they would do what the sidestep move if we were to pass a toy store or candy store.
Block your vision.
Block your vision, right? They did the side hustle thing, and I didn't know what a candy store or a toy store looked like until I was in my teens. So imagine the first time that you see that, right? But yeah, I mean, it's the immigrant story. It's the it's the family that tries to make the best things happen with the resources they have. And
where was it that you guys immigrated into? What state?
So we came into Austin, Texas first, and
no way. Wow.
Yeah, and that was in '84. So you can imagine it wasn't as happening as it is now.
Yeah, very different place.
And we moved around. And we moved around a lot. We
close knit family, small nuclear family.
Yep. Small family. And I have two other sisters, and just had to figure it out, and mowed lawns and did this.
Did you always have this entrepreneurial bug? Were there any early signs of entrepreneurial tendencies?
So I think that often I would look to do different things, mow lawns and shovel snow, and it's doing some of those different activities allowed me to see money and have a certain relationship with money and understand that I had to figure it out, and the value of money and just entrepreneurship at a very early age. And that broadened the horizon a little bit, the curiosity. And I looked at other friends and family that went into traditional roles that were not entrepreneurship, and often they didn't control their destiny. And I felt that, as an entrepreneur, if it's going to fail, fully accountable, it'll be on my shoulders, and I don't make it because of me, not because of someone else.
It's powerful.
And that's what kind of resonated with me.
Yeah, you said cutting grass. How old were you when you started making money of some report?
I was probably 12 or 13.
Yeah,
12 or 13, very young and just green to the world.
Do you remember at that age what career path you always thought you would go down?
I think we had career day, and there was someone that came in, and they were an airline pilot, and I thought it was like the coolest job ever. I'm like, I want to do that. They get to travel the world, and they get an opportunity to experience different things, and that was something that resonated with me early on.
Yeah. I think that through our teens and 20s, some into their 30s, there are jobs that we take because we need a job, and that yet they are formative. I don't think there are any real mistakes in the way that each of us cultivate our careers, really. I wonder if there are particularly impactful, now 2020 hindsight as it is, when you look back, a job that you hated and loved at the same time, something that was particularly formative but grueling.
Oh, wow. So many different hats, right? That I've worn. looking back to the time that I collected antique textiles and I was in Europe and overseas and bazaars and different markets and haggling with these guys and understanding that when you get offered the tea, you have to drink it. It might insult someone.
Yeah. Yeah. You were a nightclub promoter, as I recall, which in my experience is one of the more stressful kind of entrepreneurial ventures. What did the nightclub business prepare you for as an entrepreneur?
Everything and anything. So welcome to now what we're doing now. And it's, you're drinking water through a fire hose and, not out of the little spigot. So you got handed, if it rained on that event, if the performer didn't show up, you had to compromise and figure it out. And that's
solving problems in real time,
pivoting constantly.
Yeah. Yeah. And with this industry, as volume is ramping, you have to be able to think on your feet. When you get pulled into interviews with news outlets, you have to be able to think on your feet. I would imagine that some of the skills you developed in those early parts of your career really helped develop and sort of cultivate that poise, that executive function. You mentioned you had a business that you exited that allowed you to enter into the recycling business. Can you tell me a bit about the work that led up to and informed your decision to jump into the clean energy space?
It was actually a pretty good segue in the sense that we handled and managed e-waste. So we saw phones and tablets and different office products that had circuit boards, and some were hazardous material and some were not. And so being able to manage that, being able to look at the model, and try to make, dollars and cents at every turn. How do I make money with a distressed asset? And that was something that was very valuable, that it taught us how to manage something, a different asset now, which within the renewable energy space. But it was all the lessons, all of the logistical lessons that we learned, all the partnerships that we made that helped us get into this space.
Do you remember the moment when you first gained awareness that there was an opportunity and a need for recycling, particularly in the solar industry, or even reverse logistics management, or you leveraging the skills that you had developed through e-waste into this new sector? What called you to this sort of blue ocean, as it were?
I think early on, when we started to see that solar was being adopted within the 3PLs, within distribution on, rooftops within the Northeast, and seeing the impact and starting to get a couple of calls on the e-waste side where, what do we do with this, right? There's no provider, there's no solution. And so I think early on we decided that someone's got to figure this out.
Yeah.
And
so phone calls coming in, realizing they keep coming in because they're not finding solutions. We've talked around the fringes of it, but I'm curious, when you started into this business, I asked earlier what needed to be true. What assumptions did you have to challenge in the first couple of years of starting this business to even get to product market fit, to find a thing that people were willing to pay for?
One of the challenges or one of the things that we needed to hold true was, could it be done? Could solar panels be recycled? How robust was the secondary?
Profitably?
Profitably, right. And what did the secondary market look like? Looking at some of the folks that you just mentioned prior, they were selling panels, but how big was the secondary market?
Right.
Because we needed all pistons go. We needed all these things to happen for it to be a successful business. And, as we developed this game plan, we started to look at vertical integration. How do we, deploy some of these assets from a resale standpoint? How do we get involved with asset owners early on to add value-added services so that it's not it's an afterthought. We're able to service them. And on the other front, how can we produce new products that maybe people aren't thinking about? Not just solar, but what about sandblasting material? You can take this glass, and so it's running in 100 different directions to make a business profitable and work.
You mentioned throughput in several articles that I read around, especially John Engel did a great article with you guys, where they showed, and I'll link to that. I think that they did a good job of showing like what the factory looks like. But one of the things he pointed out is that the incentives from the IRA could lead to folks retiring, as it were, solar modules sooner for new, more efficient product, which means we've got to figure out where those products go. So let's talk about the underlying need for throughput as a variable to both efficiency and profitability for this business. Where is it at right now? Where does it need to be? And then give me a sense of the scale of those that can service the industry to get us kind of where we need to be.
So, I can tell you from our experience, it's been, we have the highest throughput numbers within the industry at 7,500 modules processed a day at a facility that's 345,000 pounds. So when you look at those numbers, that's 700 737 Boeing planes. That's the equivalency. And when you unpack that conversation, if the standard operating throughput right now within industry standards is one every 10 minutes, or one per minute rather, I think the challenge then becomes, how do you do this faster? We're at 10-to-1 ratio, and how do you do this as looking at this site in Texas just recently that came out with 3,300 acres of material. It really comes down to
hailstorms. What you're talking about?
By hailstorms, right? For that to be a successful campaign, even if we were to replicate our facility and we quadruple our capacity, we would only solve 25% of the national need for recycling. So
if you could quadrupled your output, let's say you built 3 new factories outside of the one you have in Yuma, Arizona, you would still only address a quarter of the industry's requirements.
Correct. And that's 522 million pounds in a given year. So why that's important, because if we look at the NREL report, which as we look at the data points, it's the end of life is 50 times bigger and 5 times sooner than that report, because that report factored in a 30-year runway, and we're seeing these assets,
Can you
come
say
to
that again?
the end of life.
Life is what?
So end of life, the end of life report in 2016 with Irina, as we looked at those figures, based on our data points, we're seeing that the problem is 50 times bigger and 5 times sooner than what was originally reported back in 2016. So yes, to your point, we're going to need partners. We're going to need other folks to jump in the deep end.
Where does that come from? Who could service the industry?
It's not going to be one player. It would be foolish to think that we are going to be the only players that are going to solve this problem. It's going to be a lot of collaboration. It is going to be a network. And I believe that it's not going to be an off-the-shelf solution, as they do exist currently right now, but they're not able to do every type of panel. They're not able to process every type of panel and every type of size of panel. So I do believe that this is going to evolve. Newer technology.
You said not every type of panel. What are some of the problem areas for recycling right now?
So the current technology, and I can't go in, I'm not going to go into our proprietary, because our proprietary process, we can manage every type of panel, but what's currently in the market today, has limitations, as it uses a hot knife method, which is great to extract the glass on the surface, but then what do you do with bent frame panels? What do you do with bifacials? What do you do with thin film? That off the shelf solution cannot handle or manage that type of material.
Yeah. What was the first one you mentioned? You said something then bifacial and thin film.
So bifacials, thin film, if the panels are bent, deformed,
bent frames.
Bent frames, correct. The frames are deformed or.
Well, that seems like it's got to be. I'm going to guess 10 to 25% of the product that comes off. I mean, some of it's breaking because it gets dropped or it gets run over. So hot knife method is a product, is a methodology that works, but can't handle bifacial, which everybody who's been installing utility scale solar has been moving to. Thin film, which is everybody else,
right?
And bent frames. Your technology sounds like is able to do that. You've innovated a bit around at least the capacity for different types of solar modules. Not sure about the bent frames. What is it about the bent frame that makes it difficult? I don't get that.
The machinery that currently exists, the off the shelf solution, is not able to manage that type of product.
It's like trying to put a wrinkled dollar in the drink machine.
Perfect. There you go.
You're going to use that one again.
I'm going to steal a couple of things from you this particular interview. But yes, to your point, yes.
Okay. Golly, what did you learn the most early on? So we're now for almost 5 years into you running this business. What was the hardest part of getting to what you might consider to be product market fit? First of all, do you feel like you've reached product market fit? You got something people are willing to pay for that you can maintain profitably and grow? Yes?
So the answer is no.
No.
Humbly no.
Thank you for being vulnerable and honest.
Yeah. Humbly no. And the reason I say that is because there's going to be a lot more innovation that comes into the space. It's
Sure.
not one and done. Going back to the throughput, where this becomes lucrative or profitable is be able to effectively do this at scale, because we're going to be drinking through a fire hose.
Yeah. What's the scale of throughput that makes it profitable?
It's not a
rough numbers.
Yeah. I mean, no, it's not an exact number per se. It's
not exact science.
Yeah. It's automation. It's robotics. It's extracting as much of this material as possible. It's getting some of the critical materials out in a more cleaner method so that you don't have to reprocess some of the materials through your lines. Look, this is tough material. The machinery, the lines do get beat up after excessive wear and tear. So all of those things factor into a more profitable business, a more streamlined business.
Well, what are customers paying for right now?
It all ranges. In some cases, we're able to get more value recovery. They may be at $10 or $12. It can go all the way to $24, $25, depending on the type of panel.
Yeah, so they're paying right now for you to take it away, do whatever you want to do with it.
Correct.
I guess I'm trying to figure out, because I want to understand if there's any way for us as observers to identify areas where we can contribute, anticipation of when this will turn the corner, and every developer will say, oh yes, we recycle our modules, because that makes sense. The way in the 90s, as I was coming of age, our generation said, of course we want to recycle our glass bottles and take them back. Now, there were systems in place for that, right? Trying to understand that part of it and what developers right now value in this process. Because you see folks like Lightsource and Silicon Ranch and other big developers making commitments to recycling.
No, so to your point, I mean, we want to talk about the wins, right? So we do have some wins. We have some folks that are committed, as you mentioned. We have the Silfabs and we have some of these other developers and manufacturers now. Even Canadian Solar has now stepped up and contributed to that closed loop model. So we're starting to see these folks step up. What would really make it more accessible for all is to incentivize all the asset owners. So what do I mean by that? If we do get a federal mandate, if we do get a take back program developed and started, very much like the EU, very much as the e-waste industry saw with CRT monitors, I think it will be accessible to all.
That's a great example, the CRT monitors. Who's doing that lobbying right now in Washington?
There are some nonprofit folks that are doing that. I know there are some folks, some of the folks that our colleagues in the space are trying to make that push as well. Some of the associations, but it is an uphill battle. It is going to be an uphill battle, and I think that
it's an uphill battle because correct me if I'm wrong. We can ask legislators to mandate, but what they're mandating is effectively the same way Coca-Cola and Pepsi had to, for manufacturers to set aside a reserve for buying back this product or for incentivizing the recycling of this product, right?
So this same scenario played out in California. You could go into Best Buy, buy a TV. There's a $20 charge that would be charged on top of that purchase, and it would go into a fund.
Consumers pay for it.
Consumers pay for it. Yep.
You get your money back when I was a kid, I made money because I would pick up bottles that other people thought were useless, and I would take them back to the grocery store, and I'd get 5 cents per bottle.
Yes.
Right? Yes. All those people that discarded the bottle left those 5 cents on the side of the road for me to pick up as a teenager. I appreciate it.
And you were an entrepreneur. So, you were an entrepreneur early on. There you go.
That's right. That's right. The question is that the only way that we can incentivize this? Obviously, or maybe not obviously for some listeners, ESG, environmental and social governance methodologies work for, let's say, the Fortune 500, right? Publicly traded companies who will be able to track back to their sustainability initiatives. You've got companies like Q-Cells and First Solar getting EPEAT certifications. There's a reason why they're going through 2 years and hundreds of thousands of dollars to get EPEAT certified. And so the question is, what other are these asset owners, many of them, increasingly BlackRock and others, publicly traded, going to get on the bandwagon to say, as asset owners, we want to see this, and we are only going to buy from manufacturers who do this?
So one of the other things I think may happen down the line is, aside from certification from ISO and R2 and some of the other things that have been thrown around, I believe very much like the tuna industry that has the Dolphin Safe logo placed on every can, we may see a something from the supply chain or made in the U.S. Building councils, something of that nature that will be that seal of approval that says, look, this panel was built from X percent of, reused glass from previous, panels, or aluminum that was extracted from the solar supply chain. We might start to see that happen, and some of the players will elevate their stock by doing so. The other thing that I'm kind of seeing right now is, we're working with some of the manufacturers to redesign panels for end of life.
Glad you went there. That was a question I had coming.
These guys are very forward thinking. They're thinking, how do we make this product with end of life in mind? Which is, I mean, mind blown.
That's great. That's something that we talked about with Greg Patterson when he came on, talk about origami, the fact that aluminum bins if you can't put it back, if you can't put that billfold in the machine to get products out, can we use a stronger material that it can be made here in the U.S. and not require roll forming outside of the U.S.? Things like that. I guess that's some of what you're alluding to. What other areas can manufacturers take into consideration to make these products have a more specifically end-of-life designed product that incorporates the circularity?
I mean, and just to take it back for a second, you also have someone like First Solar, right? Their Series 7, I believe, is using steel now instead of aluminum. So they're already taking steps to use products that are a little more gentler on the environmental end, because I will tell you right now, aluminum is strong. Aluminum is a very strong metal. So there's a lot of innovation happening on that end. And again, I get excited about this because I'm like, wow, it is a closed loop. It can be a closed loop. We have all these people working towards this common goal, which is incredible and very inspiring.
Are there other areas of the module besides the frame that are maybe non-obvious, but that you have seen manufacturers talking about innovating around to make it more recyclable?
I think some of the sealants or some of the glues, if you will, that are holding
adhesives,
the adhesives that are in place. Those are areas of interest. I mean, we're talking about,
because you have to delaminate this stuff in order to be able to recycle it. Yeah.
Right.
There's
several different methods. One is obviously mechanical, the other one chemical. You have thermal. There's some new technology that's going to be coming out shortly. I feel that will change the game in some capacity, but it's separating those effectively. For us, we have several approaches. It's not just one, and one is size reduction to then be able to control.
Size reduction, like so solar panels are getting too big.
Size reduction from the standpoint of mechanically reducing the size to where you can then manage it. That's from a recycling standpoint.
Yeah, sawing it in half, and I don't know, I'm guessing this shit.
No, it's getting it to, smaller particle sizes and using mechanical action to do so.
Yeah. Well, I guess, can we spend a couple of minutes on that? Because I feel like folks are probably just unfamiliar with how recycling works at all. What happens if machine on the way to being broken down? How does it actually get taken apart? You mentioned there are numerous methods, but what is the kind of state of the art, and where is it going of how these products actually do get broken down into their parts?
Yeah, no, absolutely. So currently right now, again, there's mechanical action. So how do you chop it up or grind it up, right, to get smaller in size? There's chemical, and there's a leaching process where you're able to extract some of the critical materials out. There's thermal, obviously heating it. And we're starting to see some other technologies come out within the market that uses microwave technology and
break it apart.
Yeah. I mean, it's just to get that enough heat, right? And this is going back to one of my previous life experiences when I was in the dry cleaning industry, and we used mechanical and chemical action to by heating things to kind of make a separation. And so some of these things that we're seeing traditionally that have been utilized in the past, we're starting to see other forms of technology being utilized. And I think in the next 3 to 5 years, it will look a little bit different than what the industry is experiencing right now. And it isn't, you just feed it into a machine and it comes out the way you want it to. It's that's something that, as I mentioned before, is off the shelf, and that doesn't work all the time.
So growing a business, you have to focus on finding and measuring to the metrics that matter. For your business, what are the metrics that matter? And for any developer that you'll be speaking with about how they should be thinking about this, what sort of seeds do you plant in their mind of how to think about this product?
Think about decommissioning planning. Start to think about the lifecycle management portion of it. And, it could start as early as, what type of panels do we buy? So you may get theoretically as a consumer, you may get a better deal on one over the other, but you may realize the cost of disposition is much higher,
Mm-hmm.
one over the other. So if they look at it from a holistic, 60,000 feet up approach,
Yeah.
I believe that they can control some of their costs, and it's
Do you consult?
having those.
Do you consult with current customers on these kinds of things? Are people calling you saying, "Hey, we really have to think about this"?
Yes, we're working with manufacturers right now, developers, in working with engineering reports that will give them the outcomes, more desirable outcomes at the end of life.
Right. I mean, one of the things that is a complete unknown at the time, 2014, when I was developing solar projects. Last time I was actively involved in building financial models. A lot has changed since then. But salvage value was complete guess. It was just like, let's see, I think it might be 5%.
Right.
Has that improved?
It has its challenges, but it has. I think that now that once we understand the trajectory of markets, and there are some tools that we can use to give us better accurate numbers and forecasts. Mm-hmm. But as you know, there's so many different factors, right? Where certain industries and even commodities, a lot of times they're unstable.
Is there anything particularly novel or a sort of moat that you have been able to build around your business? For those who maybe are unfamiliar before this conversation about We Recycle, how do you differentiate yourself in the market?
I think what we do is we get involved early on, and to look at finding solutions for every part of their business, and some of it is logistical, right? Logistics is a big part of it. Labor is another big part of it. In certain markets, we're able to compete at such a high level that we are able to reduce their cost. And offset some of the logistics, or rather the recycling cost, because when you look at end of life as a whole, there's many ingredients that go into it. And if you can solve the logistical issue, if you can solve that 30% breakage the reduction in breakage on site, that's yet another plus, right? That they want to know or hear about. So
it really is an immature market. Because I don't think about where I'm going to recycle, right? I'm not getting phone calls, and the city isn't. I wouldn't presume getting phone calls from recyclers that often, helping the city think through their waste process. I might be wrong on that. But I guess that right now, developers have to add in the compound problem of what happens. I wonder who's like, okay, the question that I'm thinking through is who ultimately incorporates this into their bid? Is it an EPC? Because you have to think of like, not only who's going to pay for it, but who latches onto and acknowledges this as a strategic competitive advantage. Is that an EPC, like a Blattner or a Mortensen or a Burns? Or is that a Silicon Ranch, right? Because I could make an argument for either.
All of the above. We're seeing, we're seeing folks, all of the above. I mean, it depends on who picks up the baton, right? We've seen certain cases or instances where, someone has been commissioned to maintain the site, or they've now been brought in to repower or, upgrade. And so now they have to kind of figure it out. We've seen roofing contractors come in and now take the bids on. And so now they're responsible for disposal, if you will.
Oh, yeah. Very, very interesting. Right. Because they so residential systems where homeowners are saying, I need a new roof, go ahead and take this solar away. Bought this house. Is that what you mean?
Well, really, we don't operate in the residential market. It's just commercial. Utility developers.
Okay, so large C&I stuff like old Walmarts and like I'm gonna guess here because we haven't talked about this. I'm not like seeding the conversation with something that Adam and I have talked about offline, but I know that there's a shit ton of product installed in the late aughts, early teens with like BP and Sharp Solar and all like under 200 watt modules that now we have twice the size module. Like any smart asset owner, if they're re-roofing, you're just going to pull that shit off and put new product out there, right? Okay.
Yeah, no, and that's exactly what you're talking about is exactly what's happening. And to take it even a step further, we started to see a shift, which was really crazy during COVID, where office space was being converted and rezoned.
Oh,
So
yeah.
we had one client, I think it was a Deloitte customer service location out of New Jersey. And Amazon was coming and buying up all this product, rezoning into doing what would be distribution hubs out there. So they had solar on there. Now the demo contractor is responsible and has that contract. And now they have to deal with panels on the rooftop. It's like, okay, so I'm now dealing with them and not
Wow.
some of the folks that we talked about. So you're seeing the opportunities trickle down to so many different people within the food chain.
I like to focus sometimes in conversations like this around terminology, because I think there's a lot of terminology that either is used that people don't understand or that you create to help differentiate yourself in the marketplace. One of the ones that I've heard you use that I love, and I want you to explain, is urban mining.
Urban mining is interesting concept, which I think, by the way, and I'll share this with you. I think it's going to be really interesting once we run out of assets, or these assets may now be printed, right? So they won't have frames and they won't have as much silver in them. You know, fast forward 10, 15, 20 years, you're going to have people mining landfills. I mean, I just want you to think about that concept that could inevitably happen because you have a concentrated area with mineral rich content, right? And they're going to start digging this up. Urban mining is how can we extract valuable material from within a product? And in my previous life, it was a laptop and it was an iPhone, and now it's solar panels. How can we extract copper and silver and aluminum and get it into new products and not disrupt the environment by mining this in today's world out in the environment?
That is fascinating. I've never thought about that. And it's like Mad Max in like theory, but that is fascinating. We will. I mean, it is inevitable.
Yes.
We will mine landfills. Crazy. That's like a big aha moment for me out of this conversation. What other terminology
give it some
do you
time.
find?
Give it some time.
I will.
You're going to see.
We'll probably see it in our lifetime.
Yep.
What are some other things that you find you commonly have to educate your customers in the marketplace on?
I think one of the biggest things is, you know, the misconception that either everything is hazardous or nothing is hazardous, you know? And so I think that's where we have laboratories, right? That's where we have science that will tell us otherwise. And I think often we work with them to take the uncertainties out. How do we explain to this customer, hey, you know, let's take a scientific approach. Let's just slow down and it's not doom and gloom. Let's work together in, you know, limiting your liability. And, you know, I've had certain clients, which I can't mention, that are some of the biggest developers and construction for folks in the entire US, say that we have to manage this material with hazardous, you know, hazmat logistics solutions. And I'm like, no, you're gonna spend double or 3 times the price. Why would you do that?
Yeah.
You know, like, and so you have to talk to their environmental folks and say, hey, look, why don't you talk to our environmental folks and let's show you the data so that you are not spending more money or resources when you don't have to.
I want to shift gears a little bit, Adam. I think that as an entrepreneur who has been through numerous different kinds of businesses, it's interesting to be able to sort of pry back, pull back the veil and look inside kind of the way you think. I've heard the phrase, and so I sometimes repeat it, this notion of strong opinions loosely held. I think what it refers to in my mind is something that you feel strongly about, but you're willing to change your mind when presented with data. So I'm curious, where have you changed your opinion, maybe in this process of building this business, or maybe it's just in the last 10 days, after presented with research or data to the contrary of the thing that you thought was firmly rooted.
When I first got in this industry, I think that I felt that it was all hazardous, or was all, doom and gloom. And what I walked away from, just recently is the science, the lab results, they don't lie. There are ways, a lot of times I think that different, whether it's asset owners or even folks within the space, they are intimidated, scared into making decisions that really are not best suited for them. And I believe in communication.
Can
and
you give me
relaying.
an example of that without, obviously, like you don't want to name names or people implicate, but I'd like a more concrete example.
Yeah, I mean, I've had consultants or some of the environmental folks within some of these organizations that are working alongside some of these developers, just giving advice that costs that asset owner tenfold because of special packaging requirements, special transport requirements, and often
trying to make themselves useful.
Right. So, you'll come out to them and say, hey, look, here's a simple fix to this. It will check off all of your liability. There you go. And that's always the fun part.
And they'll say, wait, no, it won't. We've hired someone and paid them good money to tell us otherwise. Right. So what does this guy know? He's not from the solar industry.
Look, I get it. Everyone has to make a living, right? I get it.
Yeah. When you think about entrepreneurs who live truly impressive careers or lives, who comes up for you and why?
So one that comes up to mind is Peter Rahal. He was with RX Bar. So early on, to look at that individual, develop a brand, and do something as simple as just list all your ingredients, right on the front.
Yeah.
Right. And it's just, sometimes simplicity is really the key to success, right? So we overcomplicate things. I think that he comes to mind, just top of mind, right? That's what I'm kind of blown away by.
Was there any advice that you got either with this business or just early on as an entrepreneur that, looking back on it, feels like foundational insight in hindsight?
I think people often try to get the smartest people in the room. And although that's great, smart people are great, I think that drive is something else. Because if you're going to fly in the coattails of just the intelligence, it's not there. The intelligence will only get you so far, and ego is the same thing. Ego will crush you in milliseconds. You need to be very humble, and you need to know that you need to allow the best idea to surface, not your idea. And so you need to surround yourself with just good people.
Is that something that you received as mentorship, or just sort of school of hard knocks?
I think it's a school of hard knocks, and look, I'm an unconventional CEO. If I'm the smartest person in the room, we have a serious problem. Like, we have a serious problem, right? Mm. But really to the point that I don't know. I'm assuming you're married. You have kids, right?
Mm-hmm. I am married. I have 3 children.
Okay. I picked, and I like to say I picked. It probably wasn't my choice, but when I met my wife, I picked the complete polar opposite of me.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, that's just kind of how I go into things.
Can you unpack that? What did that look like? How did you make that choice?
I think
what is that she's opposite from you in?
I think I always tell people she's probably the most incredible human being. I mean, just, she's a better human being than I am. And that's something that inspires me every day to up my game in that area. But she keeps me very grounded. And I think that, when you're younger, you're always looking the shiny object, the aesthetics.
Yeah.
And as you get older, you kind of realize what's really important, right? And as an entrepreneur, a lot of times, for the few that are successful and are able to immense wealth and success, the question you have to ask yourself is, would the person next to you still be there if that wasn't the case?
Yeah.
And
I can't tell you how many times my wife has said to me, I don't care if we ever make $1 million. I want
love
you
it, man.
to be available for our children at 5 p.m.
She's a keeper.
She is. Yeah. Oh, she's like, I want zero debt, and I want you available for the children at 4:30, 4 o'clock. 6 o'clock
awesome.
is too late.
That's awesome. Man.
And do you know what's true, Adam, that has informed a lot of how we've built Suncast? That conversation happened in 2015 when I started Suncast. And it has kept me from getting a job through the many times in doldrums where I never imagined it would be this hard. I never thought I would. People think that I've made millions with Suncast and I'm this like big, personality. I mean, I've got a big personality, but it has not earned us, the kind of income that many of my peers earn with a plain old job.
Right.
But what it has earned me and every other entrepreneur I know who has stuck at it is freedom.
Yep. No,
that's priceless.
It is, brother. You're preaching the gospel. I got to tell you, it's so one of the things that I always shared with the guys that are younger here, I always tell them, like, choose wisely. That decision is probably the biggest decision. And, my wife and I moved from Brooklyn.
It's such a critical.
Yeah, it's critical. We moved from New York City to here, and I think most people...
To Yuma, Arizona, for those who don't know where that is. It's basically Mexico.
Yes, we're just out there, right? So it was hard. It was hard, man. I mean, my wife cried, and it was just... But she said, I'm going to support your dream. And I just looked at her, man. I'm like, man, I cannot fail this woman. I need to... She's ride or die.
Ride or die. I love that. What do you nerd out about when you're not thinking about recycling?
My wife was making fun of me because whenever she leaves out of town, I'm watching Ancient Aliens or something, and it's like fascinating to me for some reason.
So you're like a history buff kind of thing?
Absolutely.
Aliens, that's fun. What's one thing that what's like your party trick, a thing you know about aliens that others don't expect?
My God, it's like, I go back culturally, right, to Anunnaki, Mesopotamia, and the folks that came out of that era, and all the belief systems and astrology and all the connection and all the connecting points. It's, my wife thinks I'm crazy. I'm like, no, it's entertaining for me. I'm like, all the different correlations.
What the heck is Anunnaki? I'm looking this up now.
Anunnaki,
a group of deities, the ancient Sumerians, of course.
Yep,
Sumerians.
Yep. My people, right?
Sumerian god of the sky.
Yep.
Man. Dude, have you read Snow Crash?
I have not. I'm jotting that. Snow Crash.
What?
No.
Oh my God. Adam, what we're going to get into is the next thing. So I will add Snow Crash to your list because it is the first time that the word metaverse was introduced into the human vernacular.
No
At
way.
least in, yeah. So the author of Snow Crash is Neil Stevenson. I always forget his last name. Published it in 1992. He actually has another novel that I have not read yet, but everybody who I say you should read Snow Crash, they're like, oh, that's just an introductory. If you really like Neil Stevenson, which I do, then read, there's Cryptonomicon, which is another one. I think that's the one, is like Cryptonomicon. I'm looking through his bibliography right now. Cryptonomicon is the one, but you gotta read Snow Crash, man.
Okay.
Okay. So Snow Crash is the introduction to metaverse. In fact, that's the book that Reid Hoffman and other, Silicon Valley nerds say inspired them as, Dungeons and Dragons players. Like, there's going to be this place that we all inhabit in a digital world. And I mean, dude, I'm telling you, this book is going to, if you love not science fiction, it's going to radically, if you liked Ready Player One, for example, then you'll love Snow Crash. Yeah. And the reason I tell you that, just to prepare you for it, is because he gets into, there's a lot of history and Sumerian culture that he weaves into it, which is super fascinating.
Interesting.
I won't go any deeper than that because we could talk for a while. But
no. Jotted it down.
Yeah. So what along that line, I've recently modified my book recommendation question, and it is: what book have you read more than once, or books have you read more than once?
The Culture Code.
Yeah, Dan Coyle.
Love that guy, man. I did a whole workshop about 2 years ago with my team here, and we put it together. It was based on the book. It was a 2-day event.
And you managed it, or did you hire somebody in?
No. I managed it, and I'll never do it again. But yes, it was amazing. A lot of work.
Yeah. Fantastic. Anything else?
What I'd like, and I'm pretty sure you've probably read it, is The Pumpkin Plan.
The Pumpkin Plan. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Great book. And my current read right now is The Advantage by Patrick.
Oh, yes.
Yeah. That's the latest one I'm reading.
Have you read Getting Naked?
No, but I can tell you, keep sending it this way. Keep sending it this way.
Dude. So, I could give you a book. I mean, we've got a whole thing that we're putting together on books that are non-traditional books that everyone should read. I think that everyone should read Getting Naked by Patrick Lencioni. I mean, he writes a lot of these books, right. And I'm looking these up in real time because even though we've had people recommend The Advantage, I always put the link in the show notes so that people can go check it out themselves. Give us a few pennies in our Amazon affiliate links.
Yeah.
But truly,
I'm going to give you an unconventional one that I read.
Go for it.
Which was out there, and I didn't expect. I was like, okay, that's interesting, and it was like a trilogy, Conversations with God. Okay,
Conversations with God. Let's see. I feel like that's been recommended.
Donald
Walsh.
That's him. Yeah, I read the three of them. Was kind of interesting.
Published in 1997. Thank you for bringing it old school back to the previous century. Finally, so hard to get people to recommend books from more than 5 years ago. This is cool. Conversations with God. What did you take away from it?
I think it's without even going into religious beliefs. I think it's perspective, right? It's humility. Mm-hmm. It's understanding the small things in life, right?
Yeah. Okay. Do you have a morning routine, evening routine, rituals that inform how you show up in the world?
Yeah. So I started to actually come to work. I wake up at 4 a.m. and
why?
I know
traffic's pretty bad in Yuma.
Yuma's tough. It's brutal, right? So I've started to now discipline myself more. I have 4 a.m. Get ready.
Is that
breakfast.
Okay, sorry, I won't make jokes. Keep going. Opus Dei style discipline.
I mean, no. So my production crew,
just keeping with the religious theme,
right? No. My production team, they start at 6, so the office comes in at 7 a.m. and then we have East Coast, office folks. So I come in. We do stretches.
No way.
We do stretches. Yeah. So before they start, the production team starts. Someone has to do. It's like a 15-20 minute routine. We do stretches
every day. That's amazing.
Every day.
Did you lead that? Did you initiate that?
No. I would like to take credit for that, but I'm not going to take credit for that. I think that was our EHS person that said, "Hey, we want to keep these guys safe, and let's get them start doing this.
Get their blood going. Make sure they're awake."
Yep.
messing with heavy machinery.
Yep.
Don't want fingers cut off.
Yeah. So we started. I started coming in, and then I used
Time
to
you
do
go
a
to
little
bed.
more meditating.
Please say before midnight.
No. I am definitely in bed latest by 9:30.
Yeah. Do you have a ritual, like a little tea, meditation?
I used to actually wake up with my wife. We used to meditate. It was at 4 a.m., but we work different hours. It doesn't work out to be the same. Yeah, I mean, I have a 30-minute drive to the office, so words of affirmation, just, kind of allowing myself to get ready for the day.
Is there anything that you found over the course of building businesses that you've developed as a habit or a consistent practice that gives you leverage in your work or in your life?
I think connection. I think connection is probably it's one of the most important things. I'm a sensitive person by nature. I just feel people's stuff, and so I like being connected to the group of people that I work with, and I like having not just a boss to employee relationship. I'm in it with them. We're in it.
Adam, if folks wanted to connect with you, what's the best way they could do it? How do you like to be found?
LinkedIn. LinkedIn's always the easiest. Yeah, LinkedIn's
always easiest. We'll make sure that is shared in the show notes. If, as we wrap here, I have a couple of questions for you. If you could leave every person that you meet with one thing, what would it be? One thing. I would leave them with knowledge and a skill set, because that would mean more than money or any other resource, as they would be able to build on it and create a path for themselves. I love that. Yeah. I sort of bench watch these videos where people say, if I had to start over with no money in the bank, here's all the things I would do. And what they really teach in those videos is, here are the things I've learned over the last 10, 15, 20 years that I could use to make money. I think those are some super valuable sort of knowledge transfer. What a time we live in, where you have access to conversations like this, or videos with Alex Hormozy, or even smarter, more longer standing entrepreneurs. I'm so in awe that we live in a time where it's so easy to transfer this knowledge. Adam, as a final question, what will have changed as a result of the work that you're doing? I think community. I think community is what is happening right now. I'm just, every day I wake up and I'm like, I'm so inspired. I'm so humbled by the fact that I'm working in an industry that is solving real problems. And as I mentioned to you before, it's not even about power generation. It is empowerment. It's access. It's so much more. And you wake up every day, you're like, we're doing something. And to share this with your audience, I remember the first time that we exported panels to a third world country, and I was asking this gentleman, okay, so now we sold you a couple of containers of panels. What does this mean? He sends me a video and says, I am in a war environment, area of conflict. Wow. And as areas are getting bombed and people have to move, these assets have wheels on them, and we're just moving them to different areas as the country is being run on 4 hours of diesel. And this is now solving that problem. And I said to myself, man, I mean, to talk about what your legacy, what is it that what kind of contribution are you going to make in this world, right? We're at the forefront. Every single person in this industry is at the forefront. They are contributing to access. Adam Saghei, it's fantastic getting to know the work that you're about. And I think that there are folks in this industry like you who see the redemptive side of this industry. It's not just about extractive, make as much as you can, and out to take over the oil and gas sector. No, it's like circularity is what it's about. How do we actually create something that is sustainable in all ways? And that's what I appreciate about the work that you and others tackling this problem of reduce, reuse, recycle, repurpose these products, re-engineer them so that we can engineer out the waste and improve the circularity of this product. Thank you for the work that you're doing. Thank you for taking time to come on Suncast. Tell us more about it.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing the story. Thank you for continuing to push the solar story.